Well, hey guys, I'm Tim Langston with Red Dog Bushcraft, and today I thought I would go over one of my favorite knives, the PLSK 1 Pathfinder Logo Series 1 knife. Just a little bit about this knife. You've seen me using it for several years now. This knife is strapped on my side for, I think, every survival class I've ever taught. This is my one tool option. This is the one that I strap on my side when I'm going to go out for an extended period of time. It's always either strapped directly to my side or in my vehicle that I'm going to be traveling out of as I use different knives. So I've grown to enjoy this knife very much. This knife runs $300. You can purchase this at Self-Reliance Outfitters. You can find those on the website. That is Dave Canterbury's store. You'll see him do some reviews, and I think he had a pretty big hand in the development or the design of this particular knife. This knife is 3/16 of an inch thick, and it's 01 tool steel. It's 10 inches long overall. It has a 5.5 inch long blade. It's in a Scandinavian grind. Now when it came, it had a Scandinavian grind, but they had a little fine edge put on the very end here of the grind that gave it a little bit of an extra sharpening right there at the end, and it kind of keeps it from being that full flat Scandinavian grind, keeps it from being quite so brittle and all. But with the thickness of this blade, as I started using it, I found that just sharpening it and doing the full Scandinavian grind with no secondary bevel works for me a lot better for most of the applications that I'm using this knife for. The sheath itself is a hybrid type sheath. The outside is Kydex, and the belt loop part is leather, and the leather comes way down on the Kydex. Very nice design, has a fire steel loop on it, which I really like in a sheath. I like keeping my primary fire steel right on my belt, right on my sheath. I always recommend that you keep an extra one somewhere else, but having that one attached right to the knife is very handy when you're teaching and when you're out and you're starting a lot of fires. You're using your knife and the backside of that knife and the spine many times to start those fires, just showing the multi-purpose of a knife. And another thing that you can do with it, and having that fire steel loop right there on that sheath to use as your everyday is just a very handy thing to have. On the Kydex side, they have this retention system. This is when it's all the way down, the knife slides in and out of the Kydex very easily. But if you were traveling through the woods or you were in a boat or something like that and you were worried about that knife falling out, it locks it in there. And you can really pull and get it out, but it's quite the job to do it. And that's what it's intended to do. That is designed to make that knife stay in that sheath by opening up this section right here. Now I've used this knife a lot, and when I first got it, well, you can tell it too, I need to clean it up a little bit. I should have taken a little bit more care and cleaned her up a little bit before I put her on camera. But anyway, there she is in all of her used glory. You can tell she's been loved on and used here quite a bit, but that's okay, that's what it's for. The handle material here, the scales, this one is black micarta with orange liners. The sheath combination is also black and orange. It has fisheye bolts. They're epoxy. The scales are epoxy plus bolted. Lanyard loop capabilities because it has this hole that goes all the way through this brass line here. It's just an all-around great functioning knife. One of my biggest concerns when I got this knife was the thickness of it. 3/16 of an inch thick with a Scandinavian grind that is really not that tall. It's a pretty steep angle there I thought looked more like a splitting wedge than it did a cutting edge, and I didn't think it was going to be a very good cutter at all. And it's not like a fillet knife at all, don't get me wrong. But the more I used this knife and I started getting used to the thickness of the blade, the more I started to, well, I didn't have issues with it anymore. It's just that there was a lot of learning curve there. I had to get used to it because I was not used to a knife that was that thick. A couple of the things, as you're doing real fine carving, you'll find that because of the steepness of the Scandinavian grind, your tendency is to really bite down and hog down into a large amount of wood, which means you have to put more force on it to cut. You almost have to just get used to a finesse of not letting the knife really grind in or act like a chisel to be able to do that fine carving. And you can do that. I mean, you can make feather sticks with the fat wood, and you can really get in there and do some really fine small hair curls. And you can do it with that knife, but the average person, I do not believe you're going to be able to pick it up and the first time you use that knife be able to do really small fine curls like that, just because at least I couldn't. It took me a little while to get used to that and a little bit of practice. But I'm going to tell you what, once I started and once I learned the characteristics of this knife and I was able to use it properly, it really has become my tool of choice as far as a one-tool option. And that's what this knife was designed around. If you're only going to have one knife, and I'm going to tell you, if you're going to pay $300 for a knife, that's a serious bit of change in my book. If you're going to spend that kind of money and it's something that you're going to bet your life to, that's the reason that thickness was put in there, to give it a durability that will really hold up and last through some really, really hard abuse. Now, one thing I will say, the craftsmanship, and you'll notice when I touch these blades like that and I'm wiping them off, I'm always taking my hand away from that cutting edge. I'm never rubbing my hand down that cutting edge. Just a note that I see in a lot of knife reviews, and I wanted to mention that I try to do it the proper way. But with that said, the cleaning and maintenance on this, because it is 01 tool steel, it will rust if left. I've never had an issue with rusting. The only thing I do to protect this blade is I use a little bit of olive oil and I wipe it on, and then I take a cotton rag and I'll try to wipe as much of it off as I can. I keep the sheath as clean as I can. And I think what helps that a little bit is in between classes and when this knife is in storage, because I'm always concerned about water being inside this Kydex and not being able to dry it off. I clean the inside of this the best I can with soap and water, put a paper towel inside of it, dry it out real well, and then hang it upside down and let it dry out well. And when I'm putting the knife up for storage, I coat it with a beeswax type material. It's some stuff that I make up, but the beeswax not only coats it, but it helps protect, and I think it rubs off a little bit on the inside of this plastic and actually starts putting a little coat in there, and I've had absolutely no issue with it rusting at all. It has dulled up and gotten some patina on it, and there's some stains on it, and you can tell that it's definitely been used. It's not a showroom knife, it's a hard working knife, but it has really become one of my favorites. I would strongly encourage anyone who is concerned about a knife that has that thick blade to just take it and put a little bit of dirt time in and actually start using it, and I think you'll be very pleased. As far as the shape of this knife, I'm going to show you some knives later that I bought because of this shape. Notice it's not flat across the top like many knives that you see. The high point is here at the end of the scales, and the top actually starts to drop down a little bit, and the handle starts to curve down a little bit. The belly starts to stay flat, and then it has a long tapered radius as far as the cutting edge of that knife. And you'll be amazed when you're doing work of how that very gentle slope adds to your cutting capability of that knife. But the overall knife profile, the shadow that it puts out, has really become my favorite, and you'll see that as I show some other knives that I've become very fond of that particular shape. So thanks for joining me for this video today as we talk about the PLSK 1. We'll do the PLSK 2 next, which is very similar, and I'll look forward to doing that. Maybe even we'll get it shot this morning. But until next time, I'm Tim Langston with Red Dog Bushcraft, home of global safety and survival. Until next time, God bless. Well, hey guys, I'm Tim Langston with Red Dog Bushcraft, and as promised, we're going to continue reviewing, or at least looking at, a few of the knives that I use on a regular basis. As I stated before, all of these knives, I've had a significant amount of time out in the bush using these knives under different applications. And even though we're not sitting here today batoning and working and carving these knives, you're just going to have to trust me that there's a significant amount of time investment put into these knives that I can tell you exactly what at least the attributes are that I like or don't like about these knives, and maybe help you as you are in your search for a good quality knife. Today we're going to talk about the PLSK 2, and this one has a hybrid Kydex and leather sheath. This was purchased from Wilderness Outfitters, that's the Pathfinder store, and it was $274.99. An expensive investment when it comes to tools, but I gotta tell you, I enjoy my PLSK 1 so much that I wanted to get the smaller version. And when I heard that BHK was going out of business, that the two shops were going to separate, that they were going to continue to work together, but that Blind Horse Knives was going to separate and was going to become LT Wright and Battle Horse Knives, I decided I was going to purchase that knife while it was still available. It just turns out that that knife is still in production and you can buy it today, but I have absolutely no regrets in buying this knife whatsoever. First thing I'm going to do is talk about the sheath. If you watch the video on the PLSK 1, it is the exact same design as that sheath. It's just that it's a little bit smaller as far as the Kydex goes to fit the PLSK 2. So leather backing, Kydex front, retention lock, and a fire steel loop. All of the attributes that I really like in a knife. The steel on this knife, once again, is 3/16 of an inch thick. It's 01 tool steel once again, just like the PLSK 1. But the overall length on this particular knife is 8 3/8 of an inch, and the width is 1 1/4 inch. The handle material is green micarta, and it's the same shape and profile as the PLSK 1, but once again it is a little bit smaller. So why a smaller knife that's still just as thick as the PLSK 1? Just doesn't seem like a practical use of such a thick piece of steel in such a short version of a knife. And let me just show you those two knives side by side so that you can see exactly what we're talking about here. And I'll try to get these right here in frame and lined up where the ends are within good view here and pretty close to both of the handles here. And as you can see, it really is just a smaller version of the larger PLSK 1. I think there's really two reasons that this knife was designed. I don't know, this is just me thinking. I think one reason is because the Pathfinder school is so big on youth. Taking youth out and the youth having good quality gear and kits just like the adults do, that when they came out with the PLSK 1 and used it for a little while, they knew that was going to be such a good quality knife that they wanted a smaller version for their youth. So I feel that that's probably the primary reason that they designed and had built this knife. Because at 275 bucks, you might as well say, it's an expensive investment. The other reason is there are a lot of people out there that prefer a shorter knife. There's many different reasons for that, and it's personal preference on what you need as a one-tool option. But a standard that has been used for years is that you want that knife blade at least as wide as the palm of your hand. And I have medium-sized hands, and you can see that that knife sticks out past the width of my hand without any problem. And this meets the criteria of many woodsmen today. They just prefer that shorter blade over that longer blade, just because of a personal preference in the way that they use their knives and the ability to control that knife. Once again, with the PLSK 2, I was very concerned about the thickness of the blade and the knife's ability to cut. But after practice and after using it, I have found that the thickness of the blade doesn't hinder me nearly as much as I thought it would. I have butchered large game, medium, and small game with this animal. It's not the best butchering knife in the world, but it works as far as a one-tool option. I've used it for creating shelters, and yet I still have the ability to do fine carving with this particular knife. It's just that, once again, just like the PLSK 1, because of the grind, you have a tendency to let that steel really dig into the wood. And you can see here that you can get down to some very small curls if you take your time and you hold that blade angle and don't let that blade do what it wants to do, which is really dig into that wood at a steep angle. You have to really control how that cutting edge goes down into the material. And that's just a matter of getting used to the knife. But for someone who wants a smaller knife, that wants a knife that has a thick enough blade that they feel like they can trust their life to, this is going to be the one that they're going to strap on their side. They prefer that smaller knife for around the camp type task, but yet they want something that they feel like they can abuse if they have to. This is a great option for you. I set this particular knife up on a left hand carry, and this one is set up on a right hand carry, and that's just a matter of taking the kydex off and switching it on the leather, which is also a nice feature of those particular knives. But I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those. I really enjoyed the Pathfinder Logo Series 2 knife, and they still sell them today. They're still available, and I'm certainly glad of that, but I'm glad that I got mine when I did. There's always it's always nice to have an incentive to go out and buy another knife. Shh, don't tell my wife I said that. Anyway, thanks for joining me once again. I'm Tim Langston with Red Dog Bushcraft, home of global safety and survival. Until next time, God bless, guys.